Hello, I'm Marcia Kavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, if in the future the state capitol has to be shut down because of a lack of funding, at least there might be a commuter train to bring the New Orleans folks back home. We'll be looking at big problems and high hopes tonight as the legislature begins the second week of a special session searching for money. In politics, we'll analyze some new poll results and what to expect from the upcoming Louisiana presidential primary. Our Future Watch segment examines major development plans along Jefferson Highway, and we'll look at what's being discovered by a newspaper series about the gun pipeline. On board with us are tonight's Informed Sources. Errol, Laborde, producer of Informed Sources. Jonathan Bullington, reporter, NOLA.com, The Times-Picayune. Don Ostrom, Channel 12's Future Watch reporter, and Stephanie Grace, columnist, The New Orleans Advocate. And we go to Stephanie first because we're now 1 week into the special session.
Yep.
There's a lot out there on the table. There have been a lot of committee hearings. Right. What has progressed so far?
There have been no real decisions, I will say, except one. Actually, it's interesting. Remember the SAVE Act last year that they passed so that it was a tax, it was a fee offset by a tax credit. It was this crazy accounting gimmick that Bobby Jindal needed so that he'd stay, say that he didn't raise taxes when he really did.
Was it Grover Norquist?
It was to satisfy Grover Norquist. The House voted yesterday the House voted unanimously to make it go away. And they, the sponsors are a guy named Chris Broadwater and Rob Shadowin, two legislators, B&S, they're calling it the BS bill. They're basically, they've always said they were embarrassed to have passed it, they want it gone. Good riddance, Bobby Jindal's accounting.
Was it ever implemented?
It doesn't mean anything. It just recategorized some money so that it's over.
Okay.
So now that's the easy part. The hard part is everything else, because there is a massive budget shortfall for the rest of this fiscal year, which ends July 1st, and even more massive budget hole for the next year. Yeah. And we're in this 3.5-week fiscal session, and the immediate task is to try to find some cash to keep universities and hospitals open through the end of the year. There are a whole bunch of measures on the table, some reducing spending, some tapping into a rainy day fund and some BP money, and a lot of tax measures that, really the Republicans in the legislature do not want to have to pass, but know that they're going to have to pass some of them. So what we're hearing right now is a lot of posturing, basically, and we've had hearings all week in the House. All of the tax measures have to originate in the House. The Senate, which is probably more friendly to Governor Edwards, is waiting for these bills to get to them. They really can't do anything. But, the House, which is kind of run by people who are, very skeptical of the governor's approach, is, they're hearing from healthcare and higher ed officials and really everybody else, but those are the two big exposed areas. And, the university heads are saying, the situation's so dire, we might have to shut our doors. There was talk of Nicholls State shutting down for part of the rest of the year. There's talk of not paying professors. That's where this talk about not having football came from, right. That you would not pay professors so students couldn't complete classes so they wouldn't be eligible next year. And then you have some legislators who are really frustrated saying, stop with the scare tactics. And they're saying these aren't scare tactics, they're worst case scenarios. So that's really where we are right now.
So we are seeing some cuts are going to come out of this special
absolutely.
Session.
Some spending cuts.
Some spending cuts.
Sure.
So
and,
some people
there
are going to feel the pain.
Absolutely. And, universities will feel the pain. They probably will have to absorb some of the TOPS, shortfall in the TOPS budget that's not coming through. Then they have to look at next year because, what they're saying is as of now, they only have enough money to fund 28% of what they expect the TOPS to cost. This is the very popular tuition assistance program. So now they're talking about raising the eligibility by quite a lot, raising, the ACT score to 28, and, students are really kind of getting scared hearing all of this.
Because they've been depending on this,
of course,
TOPS
and
tuition
families
money.
have, and just not knowing.
Whenever there's these kind of talks, people always say, well, I don't want taxes, we need to cut back.
Exactly.
The government's been cut a lot all over the place.
It's been cut a lot. And,
do you think any of these people in their private thoughts, apart from their public posture, say, we really do need to raise taxes?
They do, and they understand that, and but they want to minimize it. And also, there is this real partisan thing going on in the legislature where the state Republican Party is really going after John Bel Edwards as the Democrat as a tax and spender. So some of it is that, but some of it really is, there are polls. There's a new poll out this week saying people don't want to pay higher taxes. Of course they don't. But, when it comes down to it, if they pay a penny more in sales tax, will they really notice that, or do they? That doesn't mean they don't understand what's going on.
But people do want to see greater efficiency in state government, too.
Do.
And we've been hearing a lot of talk about waste and corruption.
And
State Treasurer John Kennedy always has his list of, we
does.
do double duty here and here, and we have two boards here and
then
there. Do they
always,
really look at what he says?
They do, but a lot of people poke a lot of holes at what he says, frankly. So, and he's out there running for Senate. So, a lot of the discussion is about that. How much of what John Kennedy talks about is real? How much of what, how much are the hospitals really doing? John Kennedy, for example, in his speech to the statewide speech last week, talked about kids with acne using the emergency room. Well, the people at the hospitals came in and they were really talking about what they have done to reduce, inappropriate use of expensive emergency care. So it's not like no one's looking at this.
Right.
People in the legislature, some of them are saying they're not doing enough. Certainly higher education, they're saying, give us some ideas, tell us, consolidate more. Big battle over whether there's going to be consolidation of state colleges. All of this is very difficult in a 3-week emergency special
that's
session.
not going to be decided in 2 weeks. So let us, because we're going to have to move into the next session. What are we going to be seeing in the next week, do you think? What's going to be unveiled?
Once all of this testimony is done in the House, then they are going to sit down and try to figure out which of the many, many tax options they are going to have to adopt. So that's going to be the first big thing that will happen.
Errol, did you have something you wanted to say?
Well, I was going to say, as far as rainy day funds, doesn't this qualify as a rainy day?
Well,
the
rainy day fund is pretty much depleted because we've been relying on it. And I think part of what they're trying to do with these doomsday scenarios is say, look, we know we've said scary things before and we've always been able to pull a rabbit out of the hat. There are no more rabbits. And, part of it is that we had all these pots of reserve money and they've been tapped into already. So there's some money from the rainy day fund. Even this money from BP is not definite because there's some question of whether BP has to pay it in time to, for the end of the fiscal year. So that's really part of the messaging from the Edwards administration.
And there's only so much of the rainy day fund that could be tapped, and then only so often can it be tapped, too. So there's some
and again, all of these other funds,
that.
This was what Bobby Jindal did. He pulled from all of these different funds, and they're just depleted.
Okay, we'll see what gets through next week. All right, thanks, Stephanie. Jonathan, over to you. You and your colleague, Richard Webster, right, have been doing a series about what you all call the gun pipeline, and it is eye-opening. We often hear, as you point out, that crimes often are committed with stolen guns. So from your series, we're finding out just how many guns are being stolen in this community.
Yeah, exactly. We, again, as you were very right to put out that when a gun crime happens, most people know that the person who committed that crime likely didn't go into a licensed firearms dealer, fill out the paperwork, wait, and then get the gun. So you think, well, the gun was possibly stolen, and what we aim to do is try to find out, well, how many guns are stolen where we live and where they're coming from. And so we submitted a lot of public records requests, and what we found out, the numbers were staggering. I guess it's 2,100 or so guns stolen in Orleans Parish.
Over what time period was that?
This was 4 years.
4 years.
And those are just the reported ones.
These are just the reported ones, exactly. These are all we asked for every firearm reported stolen to police departments, and we did it for New Orleans, we did it for Jefferson Parish, Slidell, Kenner, St. Tammany. The averages were like 3 a day. If you take Orleans Parish and Jefferson and combine them, you get 3 a day stolen.
And so these guns, they're being stolen from just ordinary citizens, you and me?
Yeah, these are the legal owners of these weapons. A lot of people, some buy these guns for protection, or because they hunt, or because they like to collect guns, or they're competitive shooters. All the reasons that anyone would want to legally own a firearm.
And people leave them in their cars.
Yeah, well, that was the thing is, you always hear anecdotally that, guns are stolen from unlocked cars. And what we found was, I think it was, if I can remember correctly, for like one of the 4 years we looked at, it was like 60% of the guns stolen came out of vehicles. Now, we don't know how many of those were unlocked because we would have had to have submitted requested incident reports for every single one of those and then looked. But certainly it happens. Police officers we talked to said it happens pretty regularly, and it's a frustrating thing, I guess. It's something that I think could be easily avoided.
Yeah, law enforcement officials are really, really very frustrated with the idea that people are going to leave a gun in an unlocked car, perhaps even with a window open.
Well, we found examples where, yes, we found both examples. You had the one where, somebody left a gun in an unlocked car, and the gentleman I spoke to, he knew this was a mistake, and it was something that he knew, he made a mistake and he got burned. But then we talked to somebody who, they stored the guns in like a 400-pound safe in his house, which is about everything you're supposed to be doing. Went to work and somebody broke into the house and took the whole safe. And there's not much you can do in that case.
So you're finding that these guns, are they finding that these guns are being committed, are being used to commit crimes, or individuals selling the guns, stealing the guns and selling them?
They pop up in crimes, yeah. The hard thing is what happens after the gun is stolen. What we found is that a gun is stolen and then it enters into this kind of black market where they are passed around, bought, sold, traded at a pretty rapid pace.
Restolen, I imagine, too.
Potentially, yeah. I mean, they're stolen from other people. It's really quite impressive, and it's hard to track. And one of the things we're going to do in the future, going into kind of the second part of the series, we'll take a deeper dive into how law enforcement try to keep up with it. Once it enters into that world, how do they find out where it was used and by whom? And what you find is it's a lot of, it's years and it's miles that these guns will travel once they get there.
In your story today, you looked, I believe, at 3 cases of the actual crime, and then you got the weapon and you traced it back. Could you just talk about one of those?
Well, sure. You're exactly right. It was 3 cases where we detailed how the gun was taken from the legal owner and then how it ended up being recovered by police at the scene of a crime. One example I mentioned was, I think it was 2012, a gentleman in Slidell. He put his gun in his car and he went to a gas station. For 2 days, he went back and forth to work before he realized that the gun was gone. Later, it pops up in the hands of a guy who was in Bywater. He tried to sexually assault a woman. The man who was with, they wrestled over the gun, and it was used against the suspect who was killed, and I think it was ruled a justifiable homicide. That was one example. You had a gun that was stolen. Like 30 guns were taken from a business in Tampa in 2010. 4 years later, Mardi Gras World, Fat Tuesday's closing out. There's a double murder in a parking lot, and the only gun police recover is one of those 30 guns. Now, how did it travel 650 miles in 4 years?
Yeah, quite a network, obviously. One thing that law enforcement really emphasizes is, well, obviously, secure your guns, be careful with them, but record the serial numbers.
Yeah, that was a big thing. We looked at the number that pops in my head is in 2013, it was like 47% of the guns that were reported stolen didn't have a serial number with it. There's no way, it's really difficult for law enforcement to be able to tell that gun was stolen. If I arrest Stephanie and she's got a gun on her, I check and see if it's stolen. If the serial number wasn't known, so it won't come back stolen, I have no way of knowing now that weapon she has. It's a big thing. Store your gun safely. Don't leave it in your car if you can help it, or secure it in the car. Record your serial number, keep it separately in case something happens, and report it when it's stolen.
Yeah, just take a picture of the serial number. That's an easy way to do it.
A lot of people do. Yeah, hopefully more do after
right,
this
Jonathan,
story.
Thanks. Great series. We'll be looking for more. Okay, right now over to Dawn and Jefferson Highway in for some redevelopment.
Major redevelopment. Ochsner announced its official plans this week for a $360 million capital improvement, really on all of their campuses, east, west, north, and south along Jefferson Highway. In addition, they have acquired the old Jefferson Plaza Shopping Center. Demolition is underway now. And within 18 to 24 months, that will be developed as a rehabilitation hospital with physical therapy and other retail availability. And that's where I come into this picture. I've been talking to the Jefferson Parish Economic Development Commission, and they sat down with Ochsner and several other players in what's called a technical assistance panel, or a TAP, last summer, really with transportation experts, business development experts, you name it. How can we, as Jefferson Parish, look at Ochsner's redevelopment and use it to Jefferson Parish's advantage? So it's everything from how to improve transportation and access on Jefferson Highway, improving the way it looks, and there's a big reason to want to improve the way it looks. A lot of it hasn't been redone, as you and I said before the show, since the 1950s. The strip malls that looked the way they did when you shopped there as a child
World War II,
kind of still look the same way. And here you have a hospital that it's expanding because it's known worldwide. There are patients from 90 different countries and 50 different states who travel to Ochsner. They get off of Airline Highway and dump onto Jefferson Highway, and it looks like the 1950s. So there's immediately going to be a facade improvement campaign that is up and running. It will help business owners paint, rehab, plant, whatever, just to make rapid facade improvements, just to get things started. And
just one quick thing to that point, the street view, the Jefferson Highway view, is depressing. You look the other way, the river view is fantastic.
Exactly.
If there's a way they can utilize that more.
Well, there's talk, and out of this tap came one recommendation that's a little bit strange as you're expanding, to put Jefferson Highway on what's called a road diet. And that means to slim it down to one lane in each direction, expand the sidewalks, expand the treescape, and put in bike lanes and make it more bikeable. You've got the big bike path along the river. Can you make it a more bikeable community?
And increase traffic, though, down to one lane.
Well, and while traffic is increased, it also slows down, so new businesses see more customers and more people are prone to stop. It has apparently worked in other hospital district type areas, especially if they're able to improve access along other roadways, along Airline Highway, along Earhart. They're looking over the course of the next maybe 10 years of improving access on and off, maybe extending deck bar all the way to Airline and all the way to Earhart to get on and off Earhart at another interchange. One of the other big problems that came out of this tap is if you're coming from Orleans Parish by public transportation to the Ostrom system, to that Jefferson Highway area, you can take an RTA bus all the way to Claiborne and Carrollton. Then you have to walk 0.4 miles to get on the Jefferson Transit bus and switch that around. So they're looking, JEDCO is looking at making a more regional approach. They're also actively seeking investment in the area from businesses, the homes in that area, you know, all the little cottages. There's architectural value there for sure. They expect the pricing will go up, but they're looking at more housing for doctors and residents and people who come in to visit the area. There's nowhere for shopping. There's almost nowhere for eating. So it's an area that is just ripe for regrowth. And, you know, with some facade improvements, with some highway improvements, it should be changing dramatically.
And part of the parish's plans to attract new residents, new and younger residents, right, and get new families.
One of the questions I asked is 10 years from now, what will people say about this area? And the hope is that people will recognize it as a corridor, a medical corridor like they do in Texas or in Birmingham, and that it really has grown significantly.
Okay, Dawn, thanks a lot. All right, back over to Stephanie right now. Quick look at presidential primary in Louisiana coming up. What are we seeing?
Several things on both sides. For one thing, early voting starts Saturday, a week of it. That's both Democrats, Republicans. Remember, you have to be a registered Democrat or a registered Republican. That leaves a lot of people out, and it's too late to change. So sorry, this is the only election where that matters in Louisiana, but it does matter. On the Democrat, well, the other thing that's happening Saturday, of course, we have the big South Carolina Republican primary and the Nevada Democratic caucus, not the other way around. The other parties come a little later. So, you know, we may be seeing some winnowing of the field on the Republican side. On the Democratic side, let's start there. Hillary Clinton obviously is struggling with Bernie Sanders. She, you know, lost New Hampshire very badly. It was very close in Iowa. Nevada is expected to be pretty close. She's really been looking at the South as kind of a place to boost her candidacy. And there's a new poll that came out from a firm called Public Policy Polling. They're a Democratic firm. They polled a lot of the states that are having early March primaries, a lot of southern states. And it really shows that, again, Hillary Clinton is very strong in the South, including Louisiana. The number in Louisiana, she has 60% to Bernie Sanders 29%. And this is really largely on the strength of the African-American vote, which is much larger in these southern states than in some of the other states. 72% of the black voters interviewed are for her. Okay. She got the endorsement this week of Mayor Mitch Landrieu, also his father, former Mayor Moon Landrieu. Cedric Richmond, the congressman, has been out there kind of hitting Bernie Sanders a little bit on Clinton's behalf. So that's happening.
You know, both times that Bill Clinton ran for president, he carried Louisiana.
He's the last Democrat,
even though Louisiana historically votes Republican. And part of it, I think, was the time, you know, the Arkansas guy. And the Clintons aren't really Arkansas people anymore.
Right.
They've been a long time. But yeah, they've always had that strength.
And that was really when, you know, that's when the politics were changing. So that was really, he was the last one to do well. But there is a long-standing relationship between the Landrieu family and the Clinton family.
Let me let you touch quickly now on the Republican side, as we're running out of time.
First of all, very quickly, let me clarify something I said last week. There was a list of delegates that came out from the state party I talked about some people supporting Donald Trump. It turns out some of those people had not agreed to do that. One of them I mentioned, John Young, so I just want to kind of clarify that he is not
on the Trump.
he is not on the Trump bandwagon. He said
Okay.
he might be running for Senate, so he's staying neutral. So let me just say that. Also, a Republican primary, March 5th. It's very open. Ted Cruz is expected to do well, but John Kasich, the more moderate, I guess, governor from Ohio, will be in town this week. He's probably the first of several candidates that will be coming before the primary. He has a town hall event in Metairie on Wednesday and also a fundraiser coming up. Again, the Republicans have a strange system. Only half of the delegates will be divided up according to the results of the primary, but in general, because it's only registered Republicans, and there really aren't that many registered Republicans compared to how many people vote Republican, it tends to skew very conservative.
Okay, Republican South Carolina primary tomorrow.
Tomorrow, and Democratic Nevada caucus.
Tomorrow as well.
Tomorrow as well, and then a few other small things, and then the big Super Tuesday, and then the Saturday after is Louisiana. So for 3 days, we will be in the spotlight.
Okay, very good. Thanks a lot, Stephanie.
Sure.
Okay, over to Errol now. And there have been hopes and dreams of a commuter train between Baton Rouge and New Orleans, and maybe it might become reality.
For years and years, and this is an idea that I mean, emotionally I like, but I keep thinking it's going to go away. We'll never hear from it again, and it keeps on coming back because on the one hand, the argument against it is, why do we need this? I mean, you can almost drive between New Orleans and Baton Rouge before going and park your car somewhere and taking a train and going and having to park on the other side. You know, what's the purpose of it? Especially with all the expenses. The Obama administration offered the states some money to do studies about intercity railroad connections, and Bobby Jindal turned it down, saying that, well, it's not enough of a study. It's done now. Of course, Jindal kind of playing to a conservative audience. Conservatives have always sort of like looked down at passenger railroads as being a waste of money. So it would have been consistent with the philosophy. But John Bell Edwards has said he wants to do all that he can to try to establish this route. And I think one thing that's making changing the thinking a little bit is that one is people seeing a real growth between Baton Rouge and New Orleans, that whole belt between the two, that's really become a very, very important metropolitan area. There was a study that was done last year of a coalition of groups looking at it again. And what's different now is in the past, I think when people were looking at this, they were thinking about high-speed trains going back and forth all day. And that can't be done. One, you probably don't need it. It's too expensive. The infrastructure would need to be rebuilt. There's a lot of bridges along the way, old wooden bridges that couldn't withstand high-speed trains. But then they started saying, what if you have like a regular train that goes maybe like top speed, 75 miles an hour, and that makes several stops along the way? Would that not make sense? And, you know, if it started in New Orleans and you had to stop in Kinner, like to go to the airport, and the little towns along the way, as long as it wasn't too slow of a ride, if it was consistent, then maybe it would make sense for people to take the train back and forth to these towns, and not having trains all day long, maybe having one in the morning and one in the evening each way. And as people started running the numbers on that, it became more logical. It began to look like this might be more of a way to go. So all I can say right now is that the idea is alive. One, because there's a new philosophy or at least a new approach, and two, because there's a governor who believes in it and who said he really, again, he says, I'll do all that I can to try to get it. So.
And there has been a group, like you said, studying it, taking a look into it. Okay, we'll see what happens there. All right, back over to Stephanie real quick before we wrap everything up. And that is our Senate race. Yeah,
yes.
what findings there?
There is a new poll out by Bernie Pinson, Southern Media and Research. It showed, not surprisingly, John Kennedy, the treasurer, leading right now with 22%. Next candidate, Charles Boustany, the congressman, at 10%. Various other candidates, about 30% don't know. I have to say it's a little outdated already, because one of the people included was Scott Angel, the public service commissioner who ran for governor. It looks like he's going to run for Congress instead of Senate. So I think the thing to pay attention to is John Kennedy is the one who has a statewide profile. So you kind of expect him to shoot out front. And of course, he got that nice appearance on TV to answer John Bel Edwards. He's really setting himself up as the Republican opposition to the governor. He's going to get some mileage out of that. So, but the thing about him is people are a little confused about where he stands as we're looking at Republicans. You know, there's a Tea Party group and there's an establishment group. John Kennedy was a Democrat, if you'll remember. He was, you know, kind of a liberal Democrat who supported John Kerry. Then he became a Republican. And now he's really trying to move very far to the right in a lot of his rhetoric. So it's going to be really interesting to watch how he handles this. You know, there are two congressmen in the race. Neither of them are from one of the big media markets, Charles Boustany and John Fleming. So I think that probably accounts for their pretty low numbers here. A lot of people just don't know.
Is there a Democrat trying a John Bel Edwards strategy?
Absolutely. You know, there are several. There Caroline Fayard, who ran for lieutenant governor. She's a lawyer from a very prominent trial lawyer family, very politically connected. She looks like she's running. Foster Campbell, the public service commissioner, is talking about running. The Democrats are actually trying to figure out how to thread that needle the way John Bel Edwards did. The Republicans are saying, look, this is a Senate race. We have, you know, these things tend to be really Republican Democrat, and this really is a Republican state on national politics. So the question is, if there is a Democrat and a bunch of Republicans, which Republican gets in against that Democrat? Whoever that is probably will be an overwhelming favorite, really, even if it's a Tea Partier, I think.
And did I hear you say that John Young said he was thinking about this?
Told me this week that he is still thinking of getting in. So former Congressman Gao, big potential field. So anything could happen.
The field is not settled yet.
The field is not remotely settled.
Okay,
yes.
Thanks a lot. Time to look ahead. Errol.
Well, the Zephyrs will be opening up in April with new ownership. A new group has bought the team. The guy who owned the Pawtucket Red Sox now owns the Zephyrs. They open on the road April 7th against the Omaha Storm Chasers. And then the Storm Chasers will chase them back to New Orleans, where they open on the 15th against the same team. Okay,
not too far away. Jonathan.
As part of our gun series, it should be noted that next month, Councilman James Gray is going to introduce an ordinance requiring gun owners to report lost or stolen firearms to the police. Those kind of ordinances are usually met with mixed results. In April, perhaps, will be discussion and a vote.
So there is no legal requirement now to report a gun stolen?
No, not in New Orleans. 10 states have them. Some cities have them. Again, with mixed kind of results.
Okay. Don?
We talked about it on this show late last year, but City Park, get ready for a really pretty unique Chinese lantern display that goes up in the next couple of weeks.
Oh, that sounds exciting. Okay, Stephanie.
This coming week, the new president of Xavier University will be inaugurated. His name is C. Reynold Verrett, and he's got some Norman Francis-sized shoes to fill. So
those are definitely big shoes.
Yes.
All right. Thanks, you guys, for being here. Thank you all for joining us, and we want to see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.